My sister tried to publicly humiliate me at our parents' 40th anniversary party with a $6,800 rent hike. She thought she was clever, but she didn't know I was a paralegal, and I had brought the notarized contract that held a trap she never saw coming. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The garden was beautiful, strung with fairy lights that glittered in the twilight, reflecting off the champagne flutes of our relatives. It was my parents' 40th anniversary party, and I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the mild summer evening. My parents, Robert and Margaret, looked so happy, mingling with aunts and uncles I hadn't seen in months. I, Eliza, felt a quiet sense of contentment. At 34, my life as a senior paralegal wasn't flashy, but it was stable. It was a life I had built carefully, piece by piece. My older sister, Brenda, however, was flashy. She was all flash. She glided through the party in a silk dress that probably cost more than my car payment, her voice cutting through the gentle murmur of conversation. She was a real estate agent, and she never let anyone forget it. A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. For the past few weeks, Brenda had taken a sudden, intense interest in managing our parents' finances, including the small condo they owned, the one I'd rented from them since I finished law school. "Okay, everyone, quiet down." Brenda clinked a spoon against her glass, her smile wide and artificial. "I'd like to make a toast to the happy couple." My mother beamed at her, but I saw my father's expression flicker with something I couldn't quite place: unease. Brenda raised her glass, her eyes sweeping the crowd until they landed directly on me. Her smile sharpened, turning predatory. "To Mom and Dad," she began, her voice dripping with false sincerity, "who have always been so generous." The knot in my stomach became a cold stone. This wasn't a toast, it was an execution. The air grew still. All eyes turned to Brenda as she held the patio hostage, her glass held high. I could feel the gazes of my aunts and cousins, curious and expectant. "For 40 years, they've worked so hard," she continued, "building a wonderful life and wonderful assets. And as they enter their golden years, it's our duty as their children to make sure they are taken care of, to make sure all of their assets are working for them." She took a step closer to the center of the lawn, positioning herself directly in my line of sight. I felt a flush creep up my neck. I knew exactly where this was going. For the last month, she'd been making passive-aggressive comments about my sweetheart deal on the condo, implying I was some kind of freeloader. "Mom and Dad have been more than generous with their properties," Brenda said, her voice laced with implication. "But generosity doesn't pay for retirement in this economy. It's time to adjust things to the proper market rate." My mother's smile faltered. My father was no longer looking at Brenda, he was staring at his shoes. I gripped the stem of my own champagne flute, my knuckles white. I wanted to disappear. I could hear my Aunt Carol whisper something to my uncle. The warmth of the party was gone, replaced by a cold, clinical spotlight. I kept my expression neutral, my paralegal training kicking in. Never let them see you react. But inside, I was vibrating with a mixture of humiliation and a cold, rising anger. Brenda, for all her real estate savvy, had always been careless with details, and I had always been meticulous. She had forgotten one crucial thing. My sister and I were oil and water. Brenda was the older, dazzling one who chased commissions and drove a luxury SUV. I was the quiet, younger sister who read contracts for a living. When I graduated from my paralegal program 12 years ago, I was drowning in student debt. My parents, bless them, offered me their small investment condo. "Just pay us enough to cover the taxes and upkeep, Eliza," my dad had said. "Get on your feet." But I was a paralegal even then. I knew that family arrangements were a fast track to disaster, so I insisted on a formal lease. I drafted it myself, a standard, iron-clad 10-year rental agreement. We all signed it, had it notarized, and I filed a copy away. My parents were amused by my formality, but they signed it to humor me. For 12 years, I paid my $1,200 rent on the first of every month without fail. That modest rent allowed me to aggressively pay down my loans and build a substantial savings account. I was stable, secure, and independent. Brenda hated it. She saw my stability as a personal insult. She couldn't stand that I wasn't struggling, that I didn't need her flashy, surface-level success. When she got her real estate license, her Elise focused like a laser on my condo. In her eyes, that property wasn't a home, it was a non-performing asset. For the last 6 months, she had been in our parents' ears, convincing them she should manage their properties to maximize their retirement income. What she really wanted was to get me out, force a sale, and pocket a fat commission. She assumed I was just a naive little sister living on a handshake deal. She had no idea I was a dragon guarding my hoard, and my hoard was a stack of notarized paper. Back at the party, Brenda's voice was slick with manufactured sympathy. "Now, some of us," she said, her eyes locked on mine, "have been coasting on that generosity for a very, very long time. Enjoying a prime location for pennies on the dollar while Mom and Dad foot the bill for their retirement." The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot pressure behind my eyes. This was the turning point. This wasn't just a dig, it was a public declaration of war. She was trying to shame me into moving out, to paint me as a leech in front of the entire family. "Breathe, Eliza. Read the room, read the contract." My mind went cold and clear. A week ago, Brenda had called me, asking for a copy of my paperwork for her new files. I told her I'd get it to her when I had time. That call had set off a warning bell. Brenda was sloppy, but she was aggressive. I'd grabbed my original lease from my fireproof safe and put it in my briefcase, just in case. And my briefcase was right by my chair. As Brenda postured, I calmly bent down and retrieved the sleek leather satchel. I unzipped it, my fingers finding the thick, reassuring weight of the file folder. I didn't need to investigate. My investigation had been completed 12 years ago when I drafted Article 4 and Article 9. The clever trap wasn't something I'd planned for this party. It was a standard legal protection I had given myself, one that my arrogant sister had never, in a million years, bothered to ask about. I pulled the file out and placed it on my lap, waiting. Brenda saw the movement, and her smile widened. She thought it was a white flag. She thought I was pulling out a bank statement to beg. She had no idea I was about to countersue. Brenda took a deep breath, puffing herself up for the killing blow. "I've done a market analysis of the area," she announced to the crowd. "A unit like Eliza's, in that location, should be renting for at least $8,000 a month." A collective gasp swept through the yard. My Aunt Carol's jaw dropped. My father, who had been looking at his shoes, snapped his head up, his eyes wide with shock. He looked at my mother, who looked utterly bewildered. It was clear this was the first they were hearing of this number. This was all Brenda. "So, Eliza," Brenda said, her voice dripping with faux regret. "I'm so sorry to do this at a party, but you've been dodging my calls. Starting August 1st, your new rent will be $8,000. That's an increase of $6,800. The new lease agreement will be messengered to you on Monday." She beamed, victorious, expecting me to burst into tears or start screaming. The silence was absolute. I stood up, smoothing my dress. I picked up the file from my lap. "Thank you, Brenda," I said, my voice clear and steady. It cut through the silence like a scalpel. "I'm actually glad you brought this up in front of everyone. It saves me a stamp." Brenda's smile faltered. "I assume," I continued, walking toward her, "as Mom and Dad's new property manager, you've conducted a thorough review of the existing, notarized 10-year lease I signed with them on March 1st, 2015. The one that's still in effect for another 3 years." I held up the document. Brenda's eyes darted to it, her face paling. That's just some old paper," she sputtered. "It's a legally binding contract, Brenda," I said. "And as a paralegal, I'm very familiar with them. As a real estate agent, I'd have thought you would be, too. If you'll direct your attention to Article 4, Rent Increases, you'll see it states that any increase is tied to the local cost of living index, not to exceed 2.5% per year, which I've already calculated. My new rent, effective August 1st, will be $1,230. A $30 increase, not $6,800. Brenda's face went from pale to a splotchy, furious red. "You can't be serious," she shrieked, her polished mask cracking. "Mom, Dad, tell her, that's not right. We can just tear it up." My father, Robert, stepped forward. He looked confused, but also angry. "Brenda, what is this? I never agreed to an $8,000 rent, and I remember signing that lease with Eliza." "It doesn't matter." Brenda was losing it, gesturing wildly. "It's our property. We can do what we want. We'll just sell it. I'll sell it next week and you'll get nothing." She had just walked right into it. "Sell it?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "That's a fascinating idea, Brenda, because that brings me to Article 9. I flipped a page in the lease. The crowd was leaning in, hanging on every word. This was so much better than a toast. Article 9, right of first refusal, I read aloud. It states that should the owners, Robert and Margaret, decide to sell the property or substantially alter the terms of the lease, which I think we can all agree a $6,800 rent hike qualifies, as the current tenant, that's me, has the right to purchase the property. I paused, letting the words sink in. Brenda was staring at me, her mouth open. "And here's the best part," I said, my voice kind. "I have the right to purchase it at the original 2015 appraised value." The silence was deafening. My father was now looking at Brenda with pure, cold fury. She had not only tried to gouge her own sister, but she had tried to do it by lying to her parents, all while locking them into a contract that would cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars in potential profit. She had been exposed as not only cruel, but breathtakingly incompetent. Brenda was trapped. The entire extended family was watching her, their expressions a mixture of shock and dawning disapproval. My Karen, sister, who built her entire identity on being a sharp, successful businesswoman, had been publicly dismantled by a simple, notarized contract. You can't afford to buy it," she whispered, a last, desperate attempt to save face. "You're just a paralegal." I smiled. It was not a nice smile. "That's the other thing about paying modest rent for 12 years, Brenda," I said, reaching back into my briefcase. "You save a lot." I pulled out the second document I had brought. "This," I said, holding it up, "is my loan pre-approval letter from the bank, finalized yesterday. I am fully approved to purchase the condo at the 2015 appraisal price of $210,000. A property you yourself just valued at $8,000 a month in rent." Brenda made a small, choking sound. My father finally spoke. His voice was low and dangerous. "Brenda, you told us Eliza was living there for free. You told us she was taking advantage of us. You never once mentioned a lease." I was trying to help," she cried. "Help," my mother said, her voice shaking with disappointment. "By trying to throw your sister out on the street, by embarrassing us all." The party was over. My cousins were looking at Brenda with open disgust. My Aunt Carol muttered, "I never trusted that one." Brenda looked around, desperate for an ally, but found none. She had overplayed her hand so spectacularly that she had alienated everyone. She threw her champagne glass onto the grass, where it bounced harmlessly. "Fine, have your stupid condo," she screamed. She grabbed her purse and stormed through the garden, shoving past our stunned uncle and disappearing around the side of the house. A moment later, we heard her car engine roar to life and the squeal of tires as she sped away. In the stunned silence that followed Brenda's exit, my father walked over to me. He put his hands on my shoulders, his eyes filled with a profound mix of shame and pride. "Eliza," he said, his voice thick, "I am so sorry. I let her get in my ear. I never should have doubted you." "It's okay, Dad," I said, and I meant it. "It's why we have contracts, to protect everyone." My mother hugged me, crying softly. "That was horrible, Eliza, what she did." "It's over now, Mom. Happy anniversary," I said, hugging her back. The party, needless to say, wound down quickly, but not before every single relative came up to congratulate me, pat me on the back, or tell me, "I knew you were the smart one." The next week was all business. My parents, now fully aware of Brenda's manipulative scheme, were mortified and insisted on honoring the contract to the letter. They were furious at how she had lied to them, twisting their desire to be financially secure in their retirement into a weapon against me. I sent a certified letter from my lawyer to Brenda, CCing my parents, formally invoking my right of first refusal under Article 9. She had no choice. The sale was finalized 6 weeks later. I bought my beloved condo for the 2015 price, and my mortgage payment is now significantly less than my old rent. Brenda's downfall was swift. My parents, realizing she couldn't be trusted, removed her as manager of their other properties. The story of how she was outmaneuvered by her boring paralegal sister at a public party spread through our extended family and apparently to her real estate office. Her reputation for being a shark was replaced by one for being a clown. She lost several big clients. I sit in my living room now, which is officially my living room, and I feel at peace. My relationship with Brenda is non-existent, but my bond with my parents is stronger than ever. I protected myself not with anger or revenge, but with foresight, diligence, and a deep understanding of the fine print. And that, I've learned, is a victory that lasts.